Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. Today's episode picks up right where we left off with my friend Derek. In this part of our conversation, we go deep into exploring themes like life's purpose, religion, and even suicide. So it's one of the more personal and philosophical discussions I've ever had, and it really challenged me to reflect. So at the end of this episode, I'll share some thoughts about how this talk shaped my thinking and what it revealed about me on my path. It's a longer one, so I won't keep you waiting. I am Christopher Howell, and this is my Resolute Path.
So I'm going to switch the topic on this one just because it's so controversial and get back to why I really actually wanted to pick your brain about on more of the philosophy side of things.
Yeah.
And, maybe help me get a little more clarity on some of my struggles. I'm not religious in any way, shape, or form, which I've explained, but at the same time, I still feel a connection to the universe and the world around me. I look at it very almost scientifically. It borders on Taoism and Stoicism kind of blended together, like the energies of a car. You go from chemical energy to combustible energy to mechanical energy to frictional energy, and that energy never stops. It just changes into something else and morphs and moves as it's going through the world. And I feel like I'm going to be like that too. Like right now, I'm, in my corporeal form. But as my energy changes, as I move on to the next level, my consciousness will cease to exist because I'm no longer in my corporeal form. But my energies and my atoms and my everything else will go off into the world and become stars. And there's a good actually easy way to put this, like this bottle of water right here. All right, this bottle of water to have all the atoms that make up this bottle of water come into form into this bottle of water. You can think, they've been drifting through the galaxy for eons. They've been passed through so many different animals. Abraham Lincoln could have had some of this water that's sitting in my cup right now. And for all of that to come together into this form of this cup of water that's in front of me now is kind of how I feel about how I am now. All these different things came together to make me who I am. And then once I'm done being this cup of water, I'm going to continue moving through the galaxy and the world around me and be part of everything.
Yeah. So let's crack this open a little bit. Right?
Say that again?
So let's crack this open a little bit.
Okay.
All right. So, like one thing you said was that once your corporeal form is gone, your consciousness won't exist. Are you sure?
No, not entirely. It could just simply change into something else that I couldn't currently recognize.
Yeah, because one of the things like in science that we're still struggling with is that we have yet to pin down like consciousness. Like we only see the functions of it. We can't like pin down what it is. And we've also like been able to divorce it from something as simple as saying, oh, it's tied to brain functions. We can see aspects of that, but it's not completely solved that that's the case. And like a lot of information that we get about these kinds of things, it's oftentimes going to be predicated on a metaphysical assumption that is steeped in materialism, right? Because that's what gives us the most progress, and that's what has made the most headway. And materialism is a very it's a very kind of singular type of task, right? You can't say, for example, entertain the idea of a non-physical mind, like Descartes did.
Okay.
Right? Because then all of a sudden you have the question, which this was asked, like how does something that is non-physical interact with the physical world? And what's funny is like, people get caught up on that part, right? Like how does something non-physical interact with the physical world? So instead of like trying to explain it, we just go ahead and entertain materialism, right? But what if that connection is something that is non-local and like it goes so much further beyond like what our corporeal form is and like what this is?
For sure. Like for example, we're third dimensional beings.
You could make like the argument with fourth dimension because we move through space-time.
Yeah, we cannot even think of how a fifth or sixth dimensional being could view this world. So just like, we cannot make the connection between non-physical and physical, it could just be another level of, another dimension or something
Yeah,
that
well,
we just can't really cusp or see.
yeah, I mean, because it comes back, like I said, to like a metaphysical assumption. Like we assume that everything has to be explained in a material and a physical way, and it's because there are certain like philosophical issues that we're not able to solve. But that's the funny thing about philosophy. If you pay attention to all of philosophy, nothing's ever solved.
Yeah,
It's just
nothing.
that it's. But the analogy I like to make is that philosophy is to all other science, to all other studies, what quantum physics is to physics.
Okay.
Right? So, like, I'll break it down a little bit. In quantum mechanics, things are not as stable, they're not as uniform, they're not as predictable.
Yeah.
As like me putting up this bottle, dropping it here, and knowing it's going to land on the table, right? Things are a lot more just all over the place. Like you have particles or quantum particles that like pop in and out of existence. They have no idea where it goes.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't know if it's a 1 or a 0 until it's observed.
Well, no, that's a whole other thing. Hang on, we'll get to that in a second. And so it's interesting because that underpinning is the basis for everything else above it, right? That underpinning of quantum mechanics is like the lowest base of like reality as we know it, correct?
Okay.
And then from there we extrapolate upwards. As we extrapolate upwards, somehow everything becomes more uniform and predictable. How do we get that from something that's inherently not so? So we have a lot of things that are certain and definite in a lot of other fields of study, right?
Uh-huh.
But nothing is ever settled in philosophy.
Correct. Yeah.
So it's very interesting. Like what we end up like looking at is that we kind of walk around and like interact with like paradoxes all the time, but we don't even notice it. It's kind of like we look for like the grand unified theory for physics. We kind of like bring like the general relativity in with quantum mechanics and like make this one theory and they get along and maybe we can't. And so I bring this up because it's about like our orientation to like the ideas that we're working with as we like figure out who and what we are as we move through the world, right? Because like the reason that Descartes was a dualist and like talking about the mind might be an immaterial thing is because he did a thought experiment. He was able to cast doubt on everything that was around him, except for his own mind. Because as soon as he did it to his own mind, he's like, well, my mind has to exist in order for me to be able to discount it. But he had already cast doubt on everything else in the physical world, so you're left with a potentially immaterial thing that you are.
Does that boil down to the I think therefore I am argument?
Yep. Cogito ergo sum. Yep. Which a lot of people are like, yeah, so what? But it's like what led up to that is like what's a big deal. And then to like bring up paradox again, that solution is a paradox. It's a paradox because he confirmed it by denying it.
Okay.
He confirmed that he exists by trying to deny that he existed. In order to deny that he exists, he has to exist.
Yeah, because otherwise there's nothing to deny.
Yeah, so we're like in this paradox again. So that's why like my philosophical theories a lot of times kind of revolve around the idea of paradox. Because it's kind of a point that you end up getting to,
For sure.
And then it's funny with the it's funny, like this is probably a hot take, but so you mentioned that pretty much the quantum the principle where like when things like kind of stabilize, right?
Yeah.
When it's observed. To me, that is like very like arrogant of us and like solipsistic, and I wonder if we're a little bit off base with that conclusion. This is why. That kind of assumes that Andromeda wasn't out there being Andromeda until we looked at it through a microscope or through a telescope. Because everything needs to be settled after being observed.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like it doesn't
like,
exist until we see it. Yeah. That's
it's like,
super
you
arrogant.
gotta be careful with that. That's appealing to solipsism in a very bad way. Do you know what solipsism is?
I've read a little bit on it, but very not
so
much.
solipsism is just kind of like it just takes from Descartes, and it's kind of like an offshoot of skepticism, and it's part of philosophy of mind. And in my opinion, it gets kind of misused a lot. So how it really works is that the one thing you can know for sure is the existence of your own mind. So now keep in mind, I said the one thing you can know for sure is the existence of your own mind. What people extrapolate from that oftentimes is that nothing else exists but your own mind. I didn't say that. I said nothing, like you can only know that your mind does. Everything else might still be here. You just don't know it. So it's like not only philosophy of mind, but like epistemology that we're like dealing with. And that's part of like the issue with a lot of things that we want to try to like pin down and figure out. It's like, where do we start? Some issues are epistemological and ontological. Do you start with the ontology or do you start with the epistemology? You know, sometimes you can't really start with one without starting with the other, but then you're kind of just left up in the air. You got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, so that comes back to the idea of metaphysical assumptions.
And you're like,
I'm bouncing around a lot. Apologies.
no, you're good. You're using a lot of big words, and I'll hopefully admit I'm not nearly as schooled or as educated on these facts as you are.
Feel free to interject on me too.
No, I'm actually agreeing with a lot of what you're saying. I just have to dumb it down in my head to the more simpler terms. You know,
I understand.
Kind of like I always have to. For me, I always have to break things down into examples or metaphors.
Yeah.
For me to really
Analogies
understand
are really great for. I mean, they're just great tools in that way. You know, so I definitely understand that.
Like what you were just talking about really hits me as just flat agnostic. You know, anything can exist, and I'm not smart enough or worldly enough or whatever enough to know exactly what the truth of anything is. So all I can really know is that I exist because I think therefore there I am.
Yep.
And how am I supposed to actually know what else is real or true? I'm just not at that level. I'm not that being. I'm not that whatever.
But we have a lot of people that want to act like it.
Yeah.
The nature of conviction is powerful.
For sure. And I don't want to sound arrogant in the fact that but I believe it takes a certain level of intelligence to realize that you don't know everything.
Yep, I agree. Well, it's like it also takes like a certain amount of bravery because it's scary to not know.
It is.
That's one of the reasons why people speak with such conviction, why they act like they know, why they might like be under the impression that they do know, right? Because it's scary not to. You know, there was an exercise that I did in high school, and it's a very simple exercise. Piece of paper, right? I draw a dot on it. So the dot that I just drew represents what I know. Okay? This piece of paper represents what I know that I don't know. Everything outside the piece of paper, the entire world, the universe, everything is what I don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's like when we scale that, it's like, yeah, nobody really knows shit.
For sure. Yeah, you zoom out far enough, and it's just so much that's.
Yep.
Yeah.
All of our systems and everything, like, don't get me wrong. Like, I understand, process reliability, for example. That's like why we use science in the way we do. It seems to give us a reliable process. It also coherentism. It also coheres to like the beliefs that we already have about the world. But in some ways, like, those are kind of biases. And like our ideas about the world and like how we interact with the world. Because like, to be real about it, we interact with our ideas about the world more than we interact with the world itself. But these ideas, they're floating castles in the sky.
Okay.
They can like you can pull a cornerstone out and they can just fall apart at any point. This is why in science, for example, we have paradigm shifts. And a paradigm shift is when there is something that is pivotal or very, very important in science, and it's like kind of overturned. So like going from Newtonian physics, for example, to Einstein's theory of relativity. That was like a very, very huge paradigm shift. We had to change like the way in which we looked at that almost completely. It's kind of funny. I get conversations like this. My ADHD just goes like all over the place.
Well, this actually throws me into another, part of this conversation is knowing that you don't know anything and that you're just this one little dot in this endless expanse of unknowing. How do you find meaning and purpose in all that?
It's complicated.
Yeah.
I guess like, I'm trying to figure out how best to answer that. So, like in life and, through like religion and things like that, you hear this like word, this idea of truth, right? And in a certain sense, you could say I'm a truth seeker. But in my journey of, being a truth seeker, I came to philosophy. And there's a point where you wonder, what is truth? Like, how are we supposed to identify something if we don't even know what it is? And like, what if like this like absolute truth that we're looking for is like actually non-existent? Or what even worse, what if we can't see it? What if we're just like barred from seeing it? We're not allowed to. Right? The closest we can get is being true to and with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so I find meaning in trying to just, I guess, see as much as I can for like any given thing, to see as much as I can and then to try to distill that into what seems to be, almost the deepest aspect of reality for that thing, outside of me, outside of like people, sometimes like just thinking of just consciousness, for example. And so one of the ways in which I interact with this and like kind of have a practice around it is, through psychedelics. I use my fair share of psychedelics. And I like to write about it. And then I continue studying philosophy. You know what I mean? Because like there's a certain part of me that wants to go into these spaces and have like these, very heavy philosophical dialogues, right? Which that's meaningful for me. Is these like philosophical dialogues. I'm gonna say dialogues and put them in quotes because like there's a lot of times it's just me like in my own ruminations, but it's in the form of dialogue sometimes. But it's that pursuit almost that kind of just grinds, like really gears me up.
That is your purpose, is the pursuit.
It's just kind of the pursuit. And so like it kind of, to me, it kind of breaks down into like something that's it's said very simply in a lot of different practices. Like it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. You know what I mean? And so it's kind of like, do we really need to find any sort of like absolute, truth or anything like that? Or do we just need to like find our way to like just have this journey? Because in the span of time in which, man has been alive, we don't seem to be any closer to figuring out why we're here. Which like, that's a whole nother like philosophical like issue.
Yeah.
Like every question we have some like presupposed like assumptions, right? Some presuppositions. When we say, why are we here? We're assuming there's a reason for us to be here. And that attaches us to something that can kind of like jar us a little bit because like we might not be able to find that answer, right? We're rational creatures. So like there has to be a reason why we're here because we're rational. What if it's just happenstance?
Yeah. And I actually find more peace in myself thinking of it as just happenstance, of just chaos. Because in all that chaos, we still managed to be here, enjoying this moment, to think of all the different things that had to come together, even if it's not divinely intended, if it's just no actual meaning behind it. Still, that's just something, just the one in the numbers that we can't even fathom. Chances that me and you are sharing this moment together are ridiculous.
Yeah, that's why like Terrence McKenna said it. Like every moment is novel. Like every moment is new. Every moment is like special. Every moment, it's like when we can realize that on a more regular basis, it makes life richer.
Yeah.
And like also focusing on like the phenomenology of our own experience instead of like having to worry about making it conform to something else. So for example, people will have beliefs about something that we can't verify in one way or another, and they need other people to believe it too. It's like, no, just if it works for you, it works for the phenomenology of your experience. Go with it. You know what I mean? You don't have to have like everybody else to believe in it. Now, I don't fault people for that because that's a cognitive bias. The more people that like believe something, the more people that are going to believe it. Based on like a lot of different cognitive biases, like bandwagon effect, confirmation bias. There's probably a few more that I could list that I just can't think of right now.
Well, so that it's I'll agree. My mom is one of the most wonderful earthly Christians I've ever known. Very much down to earth. Very puts it to the most simplistic of terms, and I love her for it. And she always brings up, when I ask get into these kind of conversations with her, she knows that she cannot fall back on her faith because she knows I'm missing that. But she still wants to engage and have the conversation. But she wants me to have the faith just so that I can understand her more. And she doesn't want to push it on me specifically because, you know, because she knows it's nothing I really feel or want, but she wants it for me just so she can share part of herself more with me.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel that. That's like one of the reasons why I feel very fortunate to be a psychedelic guide, because I'm a very spiritual person, very much on my own path, but I can meet people where they are on their paths, and that sometimes includes like people that are highly religious. And there's something about it that's like very beautiful to me. It's just like something that doesn't work for me because of how my mind works. Like I just can't go down that rabbit hole in that way. I can like interact with it and everything, but like just the word belief and I are very weird with each other. But being a psychedelic guide, like I do get the privilege of like connecting with people in very deep, like religious ways, and it resonates very, very deeply with me. And like something to me, like the most spiritual aspect of all of existence is that it's a mystery, and so I just love seeing like the interpretations that people come back of this mystery for themselves. Yeah, they might think that it's like fact, there might be like absolute truth to them, and like to me, I'm just like, my critical thinking cap is on, but it's staying quiet. It's still beautiful to like watch them and see them, to like feel the energy that radiates off of an individual when they have some of these aha moments or these epiphanies, or they're on a bunch of mushrooms and they like tell me they see God. It's beautiful.
I've tried psychedelics before in a controlled setting and everything, and they have no effect on me.
I'm still doing good. I'm really not
going Palmer, please.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. But the one time I did shrooms, I could find I could zone out a little bit easier, but I can zone out and get lost in my own brain pretty easy without that. Yeah. So it really did not have any effect on me, and I did more than double what was supposed to have an effect.
Okay, because like remember we were talking about androgen receptor sensitivity. So you can have 5-HT receptor sensitivities, right? That are like different in variants. Like we should put everything on a spectrum, right? Like not like this or that. It's just like where do we land? And so like I'd be interested to like for you to try again, because it's actually pretty rare to be like completely like numb to psychedelics. And so maybe a different strain of mushroom. Maybe like LSD or something like that, if you were to ever like be interested in trying again. But yeah, I can kind of see why you're just like, yeah, from that one time, it's kind of like, meh.
Yeah, I'm currently trying for a lot of different government jobs, so I don't want to say too much on that part.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I mean, that's hopefully something that's going to be changing as well too. We have the Proposition 122 pass, which was the Natural Medicine Health Act. So there are people right now that are getting they're getting classes to be licensed to guide people on psychedelics.
Nice.
It'll be a very interesting like thing to see, just because like being somebody who's been in this fray for a long time, there's a lot of observations that I have, and I think that one thing that is kind of missing is a change in mindset as people are coming into this work. Because there's a lot of people, they're like, oh, hey, like there's this like, other modality that I could possibly use to help clients. And it's like another niche, and it's like something I can specialize in, and I can also charge more for it. So it's like, yeah, they can help people and things like that. But it's, there's like all these other ulterior motives that are going into them wanting to do this work. And for people that, that are psychedelic guides, especially ones that like we're doing it underground, there's like relationship to be like worked with like a lot of these medicines, and there's a lot of like aspects of traditional and indigenous cultures that we principles that we've like noticed that are still applicable today. So for example, somebody who hasn't ever taken a psychedelic should not be guiding somebody that's in a psychedelic journey. Almost every shaman that you would ever meet around the world has a relationship with the medicines. And so it's like a lot of these people that are coming into this fray, it's like you're probably going to need to work to build a relationship with these medicines if you're going to actually help people to traverse the terrain. you know? Because like you could become an expert on the Himalayas by being in the library. And that's the last person that I want to take me to the top of the Himalayas. Every other dude that lives at the base, it's like giving tours, take me to the top.
Yeah, it's been up there a dozen times already.
Yep.
Yeah, I get that.
Yep. So that's like, you know, a very interesting thing that is like occurring, you know, in that space right now.
I can totally relate on that because Oakland, I was a monster pothead for years, and you know I can go back on those experiences when I had friends that wanted to try it and had muscle aches or spasms. I've got a friend that has Parkinson's that he deals with on a regular basis. I was able to help guide him onto what CBD blend would be able to be most beneficial for his spasms and help him get to sleep and what to take at what point in time today as far as sativas and indicas and all that stuff. So and yeah, I learned that all from doing, not from reading the book.
Yeah. Right through experience.
Yep.
But yeah, you know, I really think that in a certain degree, it's part of doing the work in life, and that is, you know, always trying to find meaning. Because it kind of comes back to what I brought up to you at the gym, like last week, I think it was. But Albert Camus was an absurdist, right? An absurdist is kind of like a philosophical camp that's like, there's no meaning anywhere, but you can still live a good life, right? Because, you know, somebody who is still kind of an absurdist, but they don't think you can live a good life is a nihilist, right? And Albert Camus kind of goes over this. He's like, well, you know, we live in this existence. We've tried to find meaning all this time, and we seem to just keep invalidating our meaning more and more and more. And like, we're just like running out of like avenues to find meaning, right? He's like, there's three options. Like, you can either kill yourself. He's like, please don't do that. Because he even gives like great reasons about like why that's kind of like defeating the purpose if you do that. But then he's like, you could default to like something, to like a religion or like some belief system. But that's going to be kind of hard when you've already come to this conclusion that like everything has this like inherent meaninglessness to it. You know, it's kind of like the emptiness that is talked about in Buddhism. Like everything is inherently empty, right? So then he comes over to like the very last option, which is like you can just try to live like the best life you possibly can in spite of, you know, this meaninglessness. And sometimes living that best life might include you, you know, going into like a religious tradition or something like that. Because like you can still get something out of it. You know what I mean? Like, even if you don't believe it, like, just, like, letting the energy kind of wick off on you, you know, when people are, you know, feeling a certain type of beautiful way or, like, a certain type of religious way, and you're in that presence, it feels good. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like sometimes people, like, get all up in their feelings about it because they're like, oh, I don't want to feel good here. You know what I mean? Because, like, some people are very, like, anti-religion. It's like, just go with it. Yeah. You know? Because, like, for example, I go to church with my girlfriend every Easter. Now, I'm not Christian. I don't go to church really. But, like, I like going on Easter. It's a great vibe. You know what I mean?
It's probably a great experience to see what brings her happiness and brings her joy. It's a great experience to see what brings her happiness and brings her joy, too. You can feed off of her enjoyment.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Yep. And the same way with my family when I go visit them in Washington. I almost always, you know, if I'm there over a weekend, it's like, yeah, let's go to your church because I like to experience what brings my family joy.
Yeah.
And to see my sister in her element and to see my nieces and nephews talking with all the other kids and everyone just having all those connections really makes me feel good just to know that they have that.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's a beautiful thing. I mean, that's something that I think that we like take for granted, you know, like in this day and age where like there's a lot of people that want to talk badly about religion. It's like, well, we're kind of missing like the things that it does do for people that's like very, very positive, which is community, for example. You know what I mean? And like, you know, something that I've done, and this could be part of like, you know, my psychedelic journey, it could be part of my conscious philosophical journey, whatever. But, you know, I do what I call paradigm hopping, right? Like, I don't really have any beliefs. Like, I'm very skeptical. You know, I just kind of, you treat things very contextually. You know, like if I'm in this context, well, I can say like logically X, Y, Z or element P, whatever. It's like just going to be different every time. But one thing that's like very interesting for my like experience of life because of that is that I can go to a Buddhist monastery and have a good time. You know, I can go to a Christian temple and have a good time. I could go to, a Baptist church and have a good time, because like I can switch my mind, like my preconceived notions in a way that I can change the phenomenology of my experience in that moment. And I think that there's a lot of value to that. And I think it's something that's probably given me a lot more understanding of people on the whole to be able to do that. Because it's really like forgetting everything that I think I know to like have a new kind of experience.
Yeah. And to reassure yourself that you don't have to know the answer to be happy in the moment.
Yeah, no, exactly. We like live in this world right now with like this idea of progress, right? Kind of goes back to what we were talking about hustle culture. It's like, why do we have to progress in the ways in which we do, which we think we do? Why? We don't really have to.
Yeah.
Like people will try to give you like justifications, but it's like, but why is that important?
Yeah.
And it's like always going to end up coming back to like a preconceived notion that we can't affirm or deny. We just like treat it as a maxim, but we don't question it. And that's because like the first things that one learns are usually the last things that one questions.
Yeah. To me, my argument on that one is, in a long enough time span, is anything important? I mean, this planet will eventually be sucked into the star or be hit by something. The universe will cease to exist and transfer into something else. I mean, is there any real meaning behind any of it? We have
no idea.
No
like the only meaning that we're able to like glean is like from what we are able to experience. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like that's kind of like as far as it goes. So, like, don't get me wrong. Like, I definitely obsess about like the potentials of like aliens and things like that. But like, I don't let it remove me from like my life. I don't let it remove me from the world and like what might be important. There's a lot of things that we do as humans, and it's like, should we be doing this because it's innovative and it's progress, or should we kind of like take care of some shit first? There's 8 billion people on the planet. If the statistic is still the same, 80% of them live on less than $10 a day. Like, how about we get some food and infrastructure in some places? Come together as a global society. But that's hard. That's very hard.
Yeah.
Easier said than done. There's a lot of different. It kind of goes back also to people think that they know, and when they think they know, they're going to argue for what they think they know versus what other people think they know.
Yeah. But if they take a step back, most of the time they're arguing the same point just in different ways.
Yep. Well, it's just like I don't know. It's funny to me because like there's so many ways in which we're just still it's very evident to me that we're like an infant species. We can't like get our ducks in a row for some of the other things that we want to do. Like I feel like, for example, if we really wanted to go to Mars and like make that work really, really well, make sure everything here works well so that we have everything in order to make things work well there.
Yeah.
But we're like already kind of having a shit show over here. Why do we think it's going to go well over there?
That's kind of like make sure your house is in order before you go and help out the neighbors.
Yeah. Very much so. Very, very much so.
Reflecting back on a thought I was having when don't commit suicide and the 3 options.
Okay.
And what keeps me going and not wanting to go down the suicide route since I don't have the faith is I almost look at this existence as almost kind of like a video game, and I'm on a level, and once I go past this level, I cannot go back and play this level again. Period. This level is going to be cease to exist. So I want to get as much out of this level, and I want to find all the trapdoors. I want to find all the buried treasures. I want to find all the secrets in this level before I move on to the next one.
Yeah.
So I want to experience as much as I can, and perceive as much as possible before moving on to the next. And that's what kind of keeps, because I've actually had 2 brothers commit suicide. My actual blood brother, Damon, shot himself behind a gas station after a drug deal gone bad, unfortunately. And then my brother-in-law, my sister's husband, who I really looked up to because, quite frankly, you can handle my sister. That takes a big bend right there. He got overwhelmed with life and not feeling adequate, and he let those feelings of inadequacy and feelings like he was a failure to take hold, and he just went up in the hills and walked off the path and put a bullet in his head. And it's so easy to get stuck in that despair and that feeling that you're either failing or you're not doing good enough or whatever form that despair takes. And moving on to the next level is a real easy way out. But I haven't seen all this level yet. Until I do, I don't want to go forward.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel that. Well, it's like also it kind of boils down to like we don't know that we're actually like saving ourselves by like doing that, right?
Yeah.
Like for all we know, like it could be a sick joke and a prank, and like those that commit suicide just like restart. You know what I mean? Like we just have no idea, and so it's like writing it out might be in like everybody's best interest if we can write it out. You know what I mean?
Could be.
Yeah, it could be. You know, the reason I say it like that is because I'm like very neutral on the topic of like suicide, right? Like I'm gonna try to like prevent somebody and whatnot, but like once it's happened, I'm not like, oh, they were so selfish or anything like that. Like I'm like, that was the person that was hurting. Yeah.
Thanks for sticking with me to the end. Now, there's one more episode coming to wrap up this conversation with Derek. This part really had my head spinning. He's much more well-versed in philosophy than I am, and I had to rewatch this a few times to really fully grasp what his words meant to me. And it's really hard for me to wrap my head around the idea that we may never truly know what is or isn't. Maybe nothing I know is true. Maybe it all is. But in the end, I can only keep moving forward with what I believe to be good. I mean, what other choice is there? I also want to take a moment to be clear. I never meant to speak lightly about suicide. I've been deeply affected by it. Both of my brothers' decisions left lasting marks on everyone who loved them. My sister and her children carry those scars every day. One memory I'll never forget is coming home from school years after my older brother had passed and seeing my father, one of the most stoically strong men I've ever known, just sobbing into my mom's chest. More recently, my brother-in-law's passing still cast ripples that show up in every interaction I have with my sister, my nieces, and my nephew. Now, I won't speak too much of their path. That's their story to share. But it's clear to me now our choices deeply affect those around us. So if I had to distill my takeaway from this conversation into one sentence, it would be this. Real or not, I feel the connections I choose to honor. And the people I love, I'll carry them with me for the rest of my life. If any of this connected to you, please like and subscribe. Hit that bell icon so you know when the next episode drops. I love you all, and as always, keep it shiny.